Thank you.
All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody. This is Joe Marconi from Elite. I'm here today with Jamie Hasty from SESCO. She's going to talk a lot about wage and hour compliance, what every shop owner should know. This is an extremely relevant topic. That's why we have such, we were overwhelmed by how many people registered for this webinar today. So Hannah wanted me to tell a real quick Bronx story because I'm from the Bronx. You can probably tell the way I speak. It's an HR related, and it shows you how different today's world is in terms of business and HR than it was back in 1975 when I got one of my first opportunities to work for an independent repair shop in the Bronx. So it was about 9 o'clock in the morning, and Randy, the owner of the gas station, it was a two-bay gas station in North Bronx. He pulls me over during coffee break, and he pulls me over and says, "Joe," this is in front of everybody, by the way. He says, "There are three ways of doing things. There's the right way, the wrong way, and there's my way. You do things my way around here, and we are just going to get along fine." That was my total onboarding process, that 30-second speech. And back then, you had to do things his way. That's the way it was. It was neither wrong nor right. I'm not judging, but it just shows you how things have changed. So that's my little Bronx tale to start this off. So this is a lot to cover today. And I know there may be a lot of questions, so I don't want to take up too much time. I want to introduce Jamie Hasty from SESCO. It's going to be an amazing webinar. So please take a lot of notes, ask some questions. This is an open format, so you'll be willing to ask questions. So Jamie, I'm going to take it away. You take it away, and thank you so much for being here, Jamie. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks, Hannah. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jamie Hasty. I am Vice President with SESCO Management Consultants. For those of you that may not be familiar with SESCO, we have a partnership with Elite to offer some basic telephone, email, HR consulting support to their members. Have a lot of you that utilize that. If you have not utilized it, please do so. As Joe mentioned, what we used to do 5 years, 10, 20, you can't do anymore. And the complexity of employment laws and HR best practices now, thankfully, keep me employed. It's good job security for me, right? But it's a lot, right? So you want to make sure that you are utilizing the resources available to you for support. Why? Because we are in a litigious society. You have state and federal government federal government agencies right now are still closed, but that's a conversation for a different day. But the liability that we as business owners, whether you have 5 locations, 1 location, 20 locations, in particular with wage and hour, which is why I'm so happy that we're doing this topic, it can financially crumble a business. I'm going to call it like it is. Wage and hour will be your #1 financial liability, period. Everybody's like, oh, it's OSHA. No, it's not. It is wage and hour. I could tell you stories and cases that I have worked, that SESCO has worked. Joe mentioned he's from, the Bronx. Huge case years back out of New York with an independent tire and service shop that they actually did a news article in Modern Tire Dealer over it a couple of years back because they got nailed on some of the things that we're going to talk about today. Wage and hour typically is one of those things where, because of the intricacies of the way that we structure pay plans or the way in which we pay overtime or bonuses, spiffs, commissions, all of those things, that one slight misstep can really create a storm, right? And it's not typically a cheap storm. It is typically a very, very expensive storm. So as Joe mentioned, open forum, please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A. We can absolutely, I'm going to try to get through what I can without rushing it because there is so much to cover. But also, if we don't get to all of the questions or we need to talk offline, that's the perfect opportunity for you to utilize that member benefit, right? And there are other ways that we can support you in addition to that initial aspect. So let's talk a little bit. First and foremost, because wage and hour applies both on the federal as well as the state level. I can only, because we've got people spread out all over, right? I can only cover it from like the federal overview. Now, you may hear me reference certain states or use states as examples, or here's my caveat. Remember, state law may be different. I'm putting it out there right now, but for purposes of right now, Fair Labor Standards Act, been in business since, or been in place since 1938. In fact, SESCO was founded by a wage and hour investigator in 1945. So we've been in business for 80 years. Okay. So they put FLSA in place to make sure that there were minimum or maximum hours set before overtime kicked in, to make sure that there was an established minimum wage, to put in child labor provisions, to put in safeties, to make sure that employers were paying people fairly. It is really, really important to note that each state, sometimes even down to the locality within the state, will have their own rules for wage and hour. Okay. So I'm going to use Joe as another example. If he's got a shop in New York City or Chicago, there's different Chicago city limits. I work with a lot of folks out of Chicago. There are different rules for city limit employers than there are for other counties or the rest of the state. So it is really, really important that you are working with somebody that understands not just wage and hour, but is also experts in employment law, right? Because that's going to make or break a difference when we're talking about your particular wage and hour compliance if I'm auditing you. Like I said, wage and hour is your number one financial liability. On average, they're bringing in 1.3 million workers a year are being helped by the wage and hour division. People can file complaints. You can get a random audit. Okay. Those things happen all the time. I do a wage and hour investigation and represent my clients nationwide, at least on a monthly basis for wage and hour. Okay. It is time intensive. It can be grueling. It's expensive. But you also don't want to handle an audit alone. We'll talk more about that towards the end of our time. Certain states allow you to circumvent the federal or the state DOL and go straight into litigation. They can go straight to court. Say, forget about that. I'm not filing a complaint with the wage and hour division. I'm going to go and sue in civil court within my state. You would have a 4-year liability. What does that mean? So if we get audited by federal wage and hour or your state, they will send you a nice long letter that says, I want to look at these 11 items, right? And that those 11 items are going to include 2 years of all time cards, pay plans, commission sheets, payroll journals, okay? A list of employees, telephone numbers, because they're calling your employees, right? They're having conversations with your employees. Well, do you get a break? Do you get this? Do they take money for uniforms? There's all these sorts of rules. So if they go into litigation, actually litigation is going to go back 4 years. Okay. So that's all employees, whether they are still working for you or not. Okay. The financial liability is significant. I have seen and worked on cases where it was $10,000, $20,000. I've seen $1.2, $2 million settlements in the independent service shop. Okay. Not just a car dealer, not a healthcare organization, in this industry. $2 million back wage liability. You know what happened to that organization? They filed bankruptcy and they closed down. Guess what? They didn't get out of having to pay the money. Okay. So let's talk about basics. First and foremost, everybody is entitled to minimum wage. Yes, shocking, I know, federal minimum wage is still $7.25. Now, question I get at least on a weekly basis. My state has a higher minimum wage requirement. Can I get by with paying the federal minimum wage and not the state higher minimum wage? No, you cannot. Okay. Fun question, but no, you can't do it. Okay. Everybody is required by law to keep a true and accurate time record. Now, that could be an actual like old school punch. That could be an electronic login through an HRIS. That could be on the app now with the geofencing on it. Great. I don't care if they write it down on a napkin as long as they sign for it. But when I say true and accurate, I mean, what time did I start? When did I take my break? When did I come back from my break? And when did I end for the day? None of this whole generic 8888. Not true and accurate. Okay. A wage and hour investigator and me, if I'm auditing you, is going to fuss about that. Everybody is entitled to receive overtime for any hours that exceed 40. This is federal. Some states require anything over 8 hours in one day. At 1.5 times the regular rate of pay. We're going to talk about what regular rate means because, fun fact, it is not necessarily their hourly rate of pay. Everybody that works for an employer is entitled to receive these things unless they are exempt. All right, let's talk about exemptions. Now, in this industry, you're probably not going to be using a ton of exemptions. When I say exemptions, there are things that we call full exemptions from overtime, meaning they're paid on a salary basis, they meet certain duties tests and a salary threshold, and they don't have to keep a time card. In this industry, the ability to use those white collar exemptions, I'm going to break them out here in just a sec, are few and far between. Okay. You may have the ability to use a partial exemption from overtime, which I will also cover for technicians, service writers, that sort of thing. Okay. But that's only if it is structured very, very carefully. So in order to pay somebody as a salaried exempt individual, okay, they have to be making no less on a federal basis than a guaranteed $684 per week. Again, this is where state law comes into play. New York, for example, that guarantee is like $1,200 a week. Okay. Chicago, 9-something off the top of my head. Okay. Florida follows federal. Texas follows federal. California has their own set of rules. We actually don't want to even talk about California if we can avoid it. I'm just kidding. Somebody might be from California. I love them. It's just their wage and hour, their employment laws are very, very complex. And we would need a whole nother session just to even cover California. But that is the first aspect of even being able to consider somebody exempt from overtime. Do they make no less than $684 guaranteed per week? Guaranteed. Whether I work a half hour or 60 hours, I'm getting that salary no matter what. Okay. Prior to 2020, this is crazy to even say out loud in hindsight, it was only a guarantee of $455 per week, and that had been in place since 2004. Now, just because I pay somebody on salary does not mean that they are exempt from overtime. I have to have that conversation at least 3 times a week. Okay. Exemption status is only determined by job duties and guaranteed salary. It's an all or nothing approach, folks. They could meet the salary and not the duties. Too bad, so sad. They can meet the duties, but not the salary. Too bad, so sad. Okay. Let's talk about exemptions. So my white collar exemptions, these are full exemptions from overtime. That means they're paid on a salary. They might be able to get like a commission or something like that on top, but they're paid at least that minimum salary amount. And they are meeting the duties test required by each exemption, whichever one I'm going to apply. Some of these are not going to work for your industry, so I will quickly roll through those, like the professional exemptions, teachers, doctors, lawyers, scientists, so on and so forth. Doesn't matter here, right? Okay. So we're going to break each one of these out. Executive exemption, easiest one for me to determine, right? So I have
Jamie,
to be, yep.
Jamie, I'm sorry, but I just want to make sure that everybody, I didn't think I mentioned this. everyone here is going to receive a copy of these slides too,
Yeah.
correct? So this way you'll have this. So take your notes, everybody. I'm sorry for interrupting, but this
No,
is a
don't
lot of
be. Please feel
this
free
is
to interrupt.
this is a lot of great information, and this is exactly what we need. So this is perfect. So, but I want to make sure that everybody understands they're going to get a copy, and also we're recording this this session too. So thank
Yep.
you. Sorry, Jamie.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. All right. So executive exemption. I have to be managing a department or a division within the organization. Requirement number one. Number two, I have to have at least 2 full-time employees directly reporting to me. Okay. Number three, I have to be managing those 2 direct reports at least 51% of my time. Hiring, firing, directing work, coaching, counseling, performance evals. Okay. I have to have that ability. I have to hit all 3 of those plus the salary in order for me to say, hey, you're executive exempt. Now, typically that's going to be a service manager, your store manager, whatever. Here's where Wage and Hour loves to nitpick within this industry with executive exemption. Let's say you don't have a robust hierarchy within that store. Okay. Let's say you've got an office manager that you're saying is exempt, then I've got a general manager or a regional person, and I, as the business owner, am there every single day as well. And I'm actively involved in the day-to-day operations and who stays, who goes, who's hired, all of these things. Wage and Hour is going to argue with you that if you have an incredible, well, a very involved owner in the day-to-day ops, they're going to push back on any salaried exempt manager that you're trying to sell to them. Okay. Why? Because Wage and Hour says you got 10 people total in this store. How do you have 3 people as executive exempt? It doesn't make sense. Who has the ultimate say? The owner does. Right? So this goes back to duties. Department, 2 or more, full-time, hire, fire ability, and spending 51% of my time actually managing those employees. If I'm an active working manager, like a shop foreman, and I'm turning hours, just like the people I'm supervising, and I can't hire or fire, I can't write them up, I can't coach counsel, you can't put them on executive exempt. Now, likely your shop foreman isn't going to be on salary exempt status anyways, but I'm using that as an example to show where it has to be the delineation and responsibility. All right. Administrative exemption. Most commonly misapplied exemption in Wage and Hour. Why? Because everybody tries to put all of their office or administrative staff on administrative exemption. It doesn't work. Okay. I have to be doing office non-manual labor where I am regularly, 51% or more of my time, exercising independent discretion and judgment for matters of significance that are directly related to the overall business operations. That is the exact verbiage in the law. What in the world does that even mean? Right? So let's talk layman's terms. Super, super high level decision making, capital expenditures, strategic policy, procedure, quality assurance, all of these things, right? Office non-manual labor, anything that is regular or recurring, we call it routine in nature. So case in point, accounting. Accounting is important to the business operations, right? But accounting is also very routine and repetitive. We're plugging in numbers. We're, balancing general ledgers. We are following normal accounting procedures. I'm not exercising discretion and judgment as to where those numbers have to go because I know I have to plug it into this line item and that line item, right? So your receivables, payables, accountant, office manager that also may be running your payroll and doing some filing and customer, billing, that sort of stuff. This is not going to work for them. Okay, you can't use it. And I see it all the time, right? So administrative exemption is there. Like I said, learned professional. These are high level individuals that have advanced degrees in a field of science or learning, nurses, doctors, lawyers, that sort of thing. So I'm going to keep rolling through. Let's talk about the computer exemption. I think it would be highly unlikely that many of us have like a designated IT or a computer person. Maybe some of our larger operations, but they try to put like your IT or web designer on salaried exempt. Not gonna happen. Okay. These people have to be like literally writing code, developing programs, analyzing data, all of that. Okay. This is not your network administrators who are setting up user passwords or resetting passwords or setting up, new software that they just purchased from a vendor. Okay. That's not going to work for the computer exemption either. Outside sales. Highly unlikely you're going to use that in this industry, but it's an option. I have to be engaged in sales. 51% of my time away from the physical location, knocking on doors, negotiating contracts, signing contracts for services. You might have a business development person that's out there, maybe. But outside sales is all about being primarily away from the physical location. Your service advisors aren't going to work on this. And neither would be like an internal marketing person. Okay. And then there's also the highly compensated designation. So if I make a guarantee of $147,000 annually or more, and I also meet the duties test to either the executive or administrative exemption, I can be duly noted as highly compensated. Okay. I don't really ever use the highly compensated, I'll be honest, because if they meet the executive or administrative, they're already exempt. I don't need to co-exempt them. But all right, before we roll into partial exemptions, are there any questions on full exemptions? You're welcome to unmute your line or use the chat.
So Jamie, it's typical for a lot of shops to put their service advisors as a salary employee because
Yep.
so even if they earn the minimum for that state, you mentioned about 1,200 for New York.
Yeah.
They still don't meet that exempt status because if they're not in charge of people, at least two people,
right,
and they're doing the same work every day, which is selling service and parts,
right.
That's actually illegal, correct?
It can be, yeah. So that's a great question, Joe. So they wouldn't meet the executive exemption, but I would have the ability to look at that salary against whatever the extra commission structure, if they had a commission structure built into that pay plan, to see whether they would meet a partial exemption from overtime, which I'm going to roll into. So hang on to that thought because it's not this slide, but I believe it's the next. But yeah, no, that's a great question. Are there any questions about white collar exemptions? Executive? Let's see. For time clocks, do your exempt employees need to keep a time card? And also do salaried employees like service advisors need to keep time cards? Okay. Service advisors are not exempt from overtime under those previous exemptions. So yes, service advisors have to keep a time card. Everybody needs to keep a time card. Now, again, the likelihood is you're probably only going to have 2 salaried exempt employees within that location. Okay. Maybe your service manager and maybe your store manager. Now, again, if they meet the salary and the duties test, then no, they don't have to legally under FLSA keep a time card. However, your company policy can say, absolutely, you can keep a time card. Everybody's going to keep a time card. It's actually not a bad deal to have everybody keep a time card. And this is a completely different topic, but let's talk about it while we're here. Workers' comp. Okay. If as a manager, I leave the store and I go over to Wawa or to Chick-fil-A to get my lunch and I get T-boned in the middle of an intersection and I'm on the clock, guess who's paying for that? You all are.
Wow.
You all are. Okay. Even though I was on my lunch break or my break and I was going to get food, if I'm on the clock, many, if not all states will say, you should have had them clock out. So it's not a bad idea to keep time cards. There's a question about what about a company structured as a partnership? I'm not sure that I understand that question. But these rules and regulations are going to apply to all businesses, whether you're an S Corp, partnership, LLC, so on and so forth. Any other quick questions before we roll through to partial exemptions? All right, let's talk about partial exemptions from overtime. These are illustrative for you. Let me share, Joe shared a little story, but let me share a story with you. I had 2 calls from East Coast independent shops within the last month and a half, different states, different, whatever, different size organizations. Both owners had previously worked in car dealerships many, many, many moons ago before they went out on their own and opened up their own stores, right? Totally awesome. And both wanted to argue with me about how their service technicians and their parts counter and their, service advisors were exempt just like they were at a car dealership. And that is not the case. Sure, I might be able to exempt your service advisors and your service technicians, but not using the same exemption that a car dealership can. Okay, you can't. I'm sorry, I didn't write the rules. But the automotive 13B10 is a partial exemption from overtime, but it's only able to be used by new and used car sales employers, period. Okay. Motor carrier 13B1 really deals with the big trucks, right? Drivers, helpers, loaders, service mechanics that are working on vehicles that exceed a certain pound threshold, and they have to be transporting product across state lines. So that one's not going to work for this industry. Okay. There's other exemptions for farm workers, recreational workers, certain seasonal workers, so on and so forth. So that's illustrative. But what I really want to dig into is retail 7I. Okay. Now, retail 7I, if you all are calling me or emailing me about your advisors and your technicians, okay, this is the partial exemption from overtime that I would explore with you. Now, here's my other caveat. Retail 7I is not always permitted in certain states. Okay. Case in point, I got somebody up in Massachusetts that was paying their tax flat rate, which many of us do, right? To stay competitive, to keep them paid appropriately. And Massachusetts does not allow for flat rate. Okay. So retail 7I can be used by a retail operation where at least 51% of my total monies that I'm earning is coming from commission. And then the average hourly clock rate, which goes back to, I have to keep a time card. Okay. My clock hour rate is yielding no less than 1.5 times minimum wage. In this example, it says 1088. Why? Because federal minimum wage is $7.25 times 1.5 is 1088. If I'm working in a state where minimum wage is $15 an hour, that means that my regular clock rate for every hour that I've clocked that week, not turned, but clocked, has to be at least $22.50 per hour. Okay. So retail 7I is an option to explore, but it is very, very tricky. You have to have a very specific signed written pay plan. And it's a lot of calculation on a forward applying exemption. Okay, so I'm going to use a very easy example. So Joe, let's go back to your example or the question that you were asking about a service advisor. Let's say I pay a service advisor $600 a week. All right, these are low numbers. I know, don't judge me for it. It's just easy. Math is hard. Okay, $600 a week, which means on a monthly basis, that person just in salary alone is bringing home $2,400 a month. Okay. That service advisor, in order to even explore Retail 7i, has to make at least another $2,400 in commission to meet the 50/50 test. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I take that 4,800 and I divide out everything that's on the time card for that month. Maybe they worked 60 hours in one week. Maybe they worked 45 the next. Maybe they worked 42, whatever. Take all of that $4,800 divided by their total clocked hours. It has to yield more than 1.5 times minimum wage.
Oh.
If it does not, they're considered non-exempt. Why does that matter? Because if they're non-exempt, that means I owe them overtime and overtime on the commission too. This is where shops get nailed. Okay, is that the pay plans are not correct. So let's talk also about what needs to be in this pay plan. So you have to put, hold on one second, Joe, I'll get to you.
Yeah.
You have to put in this pay plan what we call a representative period of time. So using Retail 7i is a forward applying exemption. So I have to do these calculations and look at this no less than 30 days, but no greater than 1 year. So typically when I'm advising clients, there's a couple of things. A, it's got to make sense for your business, right? Whatever representative period of time you want to use has to make sense for you. How often do you want to do these calculations? And be reviewing this. But that language has to be in the pay plan. Okay. So let's use, typically when I advise, I say, look, business ebbs and flows, right? Wintertime may be super busy, summertime may die down a little bit, or you may have, you know what your normal ebb and flow is with your business, right? So use a 6 month, use a year to give them the cushion when it's slow, because it all averages out, right? So when I have that representative period of time, I'm looking at that total calculation. So I'm taking all salary, all commissions, all clock hours, and running the calculation. Okay. Now there is an option. Let's say somebody is $1,000 short of hitting that 50/50 test. You can bonus them up to hit the 50/50 test. People do it all the time. Okay. So this is an option for many, but you always, always, always have to check state law. And then it has to be structured correctly. Now, I mentioned flat rate earlier. Flat rate is a 100% commissioned pay plan. Okay. It is. You're going by the book, right? They still have to keep a time card, but the more they turn, the more they make, and you may have a tiered system. Look, between 25 to 38 billable hours, you're going to get this rate. Then 39 to 52 billable hours, you're going to get that rate. Fine, fine, but they still have to keep a time card. If I am paying somebody hourly overtime with a commission, you're treating them as non-exempt. Okay. Hourly and commission does not work for this. Okay. Salaried or 100% commissioned. You could do a draw with a settle up, which is not normally what happens in your industry, but it's possible because that's still a 100% commission pay plan. You're just advancing some of the commissions on the front end and then pulling that out whenever you pay. Some people pay commissions weekly, some people pay, monthly, bi-weekly, what have you. Okay. So 7i is an option, but it's one that has to be looked at. So question came in, if your advisor is paid 100% on commission, they should qualify for the Retail 7i exemption. Again, they're meeting one part of the test. So yes, 100% commission is meeting the 51% of total income. But you still have to take those commissions, divide it out by the clock hours, and make sure it's yielding at least 1.5 times your state or locality's minimum wage. If it does not yield that minimum wage, you're going to have to bonus them up to keep them exempt from overtime. Or if you don't want to bonus them up, then you're going to have to go back and pay overtime for any hours that exceeded 40 in that work week. Okay. And again, you might not, I don't know where you're located, but you may not be able to use Retail 7I. So then your service advisors will be considered non-exempt overtime eligible, even with the commission. So a couple of things, and then I'm going to dig into traps that I see through audits and when I audit people and all of that. You got to review your pay plans. Okay. You gotta review your pay plans. You need to work with somebody that is a wage and hour expert. If you have never had a review of your payroll and your exemptions, I strongly suggest that you do that. Okay. Don't just assume. Don't give the excuse, well, so-and-so likes to be just on salary because it gives them the stability and this and that and all of those things. I get it. But just because the employee wants it doesn't necessarily mean that it's compliant. And other fun fact, employees cannot waive their rights and their entitlements to minimum wage and overtime. Okay. The burden falls to the employer to make sure it's done correctly. So review your commission folks, review your flat rate folks, review your hourly overtime with a little spiff or a bonus or what have you folks. Partner with somebody like SESCO or somebody that is very well versed in wage and hour regulation and HR employment law to do an audit and get in front of it. Why? Because remember, you've got that 2-year back wage liability. Okay. So it is very uncommon that when I audit somebody, I always find something. Always find something. Okay. If somebody is working over 40 and they are entitled to overtime, you have to make sure that that calculation is also done correctly. Okay. You can either manage hours down. We can put in a straight method, straight time calculation method, depending on your payroll company, all of the things. So, there's a lot that you need to do to make sure that we are wage and hour compliant. Let's see a quick question. In Illinois, minimum wage is 15. So 1.5 hours is 10, 12 per week. So they would need to make the same amount. Okay. But so yeah, 1.5 times, not hours. Yeah. So, yes. So 15 times 1.5, meaning when I take their monies, divide it out by all the clock hours, they're going to have to yield no less than $22.50 per clock hour. So if they're making 10, 12, 40. Yeah, you're fine. So yeah, I mean, depending on how you structure your pay plan, if they're making 10, 12 per week, they should be above the 1.5 times minimum wage, but also they're also going to need that same amount or more in commission to meet the 7I. So yeah, you might have somebody making 105,000 or more. Okay, good question. Okay, let's talk about trips and violations and traps that I see. Trap number 1, obviously misclassification. I'm not going to beat this one to death, but it happens. Okay. Also, and kind of talking about this, remember that if you get audited and you do have somebody misclassified as exempt, whether they're salaried exempt or, you're using Retail 7I inappropriately, and they don't have a time card to back up how many hours that you're saying that they worked, or that, the payroll journal says they worked, and the employee is telling them something different. Oh gosh. Yeah, Hannah, I worked 55 hours on average per week. I didn't take a break. And you don't have time records to negate that or to argue against it. they're going to go with what the employee says. Okay. The only thing that you have, whether it's Department of Labor Wage and Hour, EEOC, unemployment, workers' comp, do not underestimate the paper trail. Documentation is everything. Okay. Time records are so important. Trap number 2, employees cannot waive their rights. I don't want you to pay me overtime. I don't want it. I want to be on salary. I don't care that I need to, have a lunch break after 6 hours. I just want to work through. DOL doesn't care. You're either in compliance or you're not. Okay. Just because the employees want it and we want to do right by them. And we think it's easier for them and they like it and that's what they want. So yeah, I'm going to do that. Department of Labor will not accept that as an appropriate excuse. Question came in about what about camera footage to see when they were there? You can, but are you going to be able to pull 2 years of camera footage to determine accurately with timestamps when they came and when they left? Maybe. But also, the wage and hour division is still going to ding you if you don't have a time record because it's required by law. Okay. So yeah, camera footage is great, but it still doesn't remove your responsibility to comply with all aspects, including time records. What are hours worked? General rule of thumb, if it is benefiting me as the employer, it's time owed in terms of money. Okay. Travel time, meetings, break time, et cetera, et cetera. Now, some states or localities require X number of minute break after a certain number length of shift. 6 hours, I need 30 minutes, 8 hours, 1 hour for a meal break. Some states will or localities will require a 15-minute break in the morning, 15-minute break on the back end, and then a 30-minute around lunchtime or dinner time, depending on how your business is structured. Federal law does not require breaks at all. Okay. But again, if your state does, you have to comply with your state rules. If a break on a federal basis is less than 30 minutes or longer in duration, where the employee is completely free from duty and performing no work. Okay. If it is less than 30 minutes, it is time owed back to them. Okay. If I eat my lunch for 15 or 20 minutes and I jump right back in because we're short-staffed that day or somebody's on vacation, I didn't get my 30-minute bona fide meal period. Okay. If you do not want to pay for a meal period, it must be at least 30 minutes or longer in duration where I am completely and freely relieved from any work. If I'm sitting at my desk as a service advisor, eating my Wawa sub, and the phone rings and I pick it up, guess what? I'm on the clock. You have to add that time back in. Do not automatically, this is my soapbox. I really, as an auditor, dislike automatic break deductions. I know it's easy. I know it's easy for payroll. But I dislike it for this exact reason. Because they didn't take the full 30, or maybe they didn't take it at all and they forgot to tell you. And we didn't add that time back in. Or managers are not reviewing the timesheets before they go to the owner or to the office manager to process payroll and miss the fact that they were only clocked out for 12 minutes. Well, those 12 minutes have to be added back into total hours worked. Okay. So break time is an issue that they'll ding you on. Travel time. If you have multiple locations and you are sending technician A or technician Joe is going from location 1 and driving 25 minutes over to location 2 to deliver a part or to drop something off or what have you, guess what? Joe's on the clock. That's travel time. That's compensable. That is benefiting the employer. Other question that I get quite often is, well, Jamie, I pay mileage. I reimburse them for mileage instead of paying travel time. No, you don't. No, you don't. Mileage is not required to be reimbursed. If you want to do it, that's wonderful. You can use the IRS standard rate. You could pay 25 cents per mile if you want. I don't care. But nothing removes your responsibility for a hourly, non-exempt, salaried, non-exempt, eligible employee to receive travel time. Okay, between locations. Home to work and work to home is not travel time. It is simply when they are traveling during the day or between locations. There's also some different rules on travel time if you're sending people overnight and away out of town, or same day travel for like training. Say I'm sending somebody to become ASE Master Tech certified, and I'm sending them from Virginia up to Washington, D.C., which that's like Russian roulette. That could be a 2-hour drive. It could be a 4-hour drive, depending on the day on 95. But the second that they leave that store until the second they get back, all of that time, all of that travel time up and back is paid because it's same day travel. If I'm going overnight out of town somewhere else, you only pay me. I'm not paying travel time. I'm only paying you for what you normally would have worked, your 9 to 6 or your 8, 7:30 to 4:30, whatever your normal shift was. Okay. Any required meetings that you are having, your shop meetings, your sales meetings, your whatever, if they don't have an option to say, I don't want to go, that is compensable time as well. Okay. Training, compensable. Okay. There's specific rules. I'll send a travel time guideline along with the slides, Hannah, when I send it. But anything, again, required training, lectures, away from home is part of what we call the Portal to Portal Act, which also falls underneath the Wage and Hour Division. Now, holidays and vacations, sick time, vacations, personal leave, holidays do not count towards overtime on a federal level. Okay. So let's hypothetically say I worked, my time card says I got 8 hours for the holiday, but I also clocked another 40 hours that week. On the surface, it looks like you owe me 8 hours of overtime, right? But you don't. Now, some states, if they work, well, anyways, states and federal, if I work that holiday, I have to be paid. Some states require time and a half or double time on holidays, depending on what locality you're in. Okay. Uniforms. Whether you are providing that, whether you're charging them for that, some states don't allow you to charge for uniforms. Did you know that? New York has very, very specific rules now about charging for laundering company issued uniforms. You can't deduct that from wages. What if I give you t-shirts or whatever and you leave the organization and I want my uniforms back, and I dock your pay $30 because you didn't turn them back in, or $150 because I bought them through Syntex or whatever? No, you're not. No, you're not. We're going to talk about wage deductions here in just a second. All right. I see a couple of things popping in the chat. Question came in. If an employee eats lunch at their desk and is allowed to stay pinched in, is that okay? No. It is if you plan to pay them for that time. If you do not plan to pay them for that time, that is not okay. If an employee takes a half-hour paid break in the morning and does not take an afternoon break, is that okay? A half-hour paid break in the morning. It depends on your locality. It's a good question. I don't know where you're located, so I would have to say let's talk about that one offline because my answer could change based off of that. Question, does Wage and Hour just do random audits for the fun of it? They sure do, actually. They have focus areas. They have industries that they focus on. Your industry comes up quite often. So if you recall, between 2017 and 2019, automotive was heavily audited because they know that this industry in particular has a ton of wage and hour violations. It's easy money for them. It's easy work for them. Yes, you can also get an audit if you have a disgruntled former employee or current employee that doesn't understand their pay plan or thinks that you didn't pay them correctly. They can anonymously make a complaint, and that will trigger an audit as well. Or someone gets hurt. So the thing about somebody getting hurt, typically that would generally trigger an OSHA on-site random because state and federal OSHAs look at workers' comp logs. If you didn't know that, now you do. They will look for trips, slips, and falls or PPE violations, and that will trigger a random OSHA audit. But let's say hypothetically OSHA came in and they were doing a review of your shop and overheard somebody complaining about their pay, or they said, hey, they don't pay us fairly here. OSHA has a responsibility to notify wage and hour. So there's a variety of ways you can get an audit. Question came in about if I invite an employee to an industry event like Ignite and they opt to go, not required, am I required to pay them? If so, is it for the entire trip or just the hours they spent at the event each day? So if it's voluntary and depending on what the event is, you may or may not be. But typically, if it's going to grow and develop them and you're going to benefit from any education or knowledge that they gain from that event, then yeah, you're going to pay them their normal day. And probably their travel expenses. It depends on where Ignite is, whether you're paying them travel time and typically not overtime. But again, that would be specific looking at when are they traveling? What is their normal schedule? How long are they going to be there? How many hours a day are they going to be there? Those sorts of things. So all great questions. All right. Trap number 3, working lunches. I talked about that. Any pre-work or homework. If I come in and I have to get my little service sheets or my tickets printed out and this and that, that's all compensable time. Okay. If you are requiring them to change into a uniform at your location, it's what we call donning and doffing pay. Okay. Most employers don't do it. Some still do. Say, hey, come to work, change here in the locker room, whatever, and then clock in. Well, being required to change because they have to wear that company uniform and put on their PPE and all of that is considered compensable time. If I have a service advisor that is making customer phone calls at home after they've left for the day, that's compensable time. Okay. Unauthorized overtime. If somebody is working overtime that you, as their manager, as the business owner, have not authorized them to do, yes, you still have to pay it. You can write them up, that's a performance issue, but you can't just say, well, I'm not going to pay overtime because I didn't give you approval to work it. Okay. Let's talk about regular rate of pay. I said earlier in our time that overtime is calculated on regular rate of pay, not hourly rate of pay, right? Okay. Regular rate includes total monies earned. So when I have somebody that is hourly and earning a bonus or a spiff or a commission, that in essence increases what my hourly rate is, right? Does that make sense? Because it's total monies earned. Okay. So things that I don't include are going to be non-discretionary bonuses. Non-discretionary bonuses are bonuses that I am just tossing whenever I want. They're not tied to anything. I'm giving Hannah a bonus today because I like her plant in the background and want to toss her $100. She's not expecting that. It's random. But if you are tying a bonus to attendance, safety, production, sales, etc., it is considered non-discretionary and subject to overtime. If you pay on a bi-weekly basis or semi-monthly basis, overtime is based on each work week, not averaging of work week. So you can't say, well, you worked 45 hours this week, but only 35 last week, so I only owe you 80. Nope. Each work week stands alone for purposes of overtime. In your employee handbook, which you should have. If you don't have an employee handbook, or even better, you borrowed an employee handbook from one of your friends who might actually have an operation in a different state or a different locality. Wage and hour law requires you to have in writing what your work week is. It is a 7-day, 24-hour consecutive period. When does it start? When does it end? Why? Because if you get audited, that auditor is going to ask what your work week is. That is how they are going to run their calculations to determine against the time cards when overtime was written. Let's talk about comp time. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. Just unfamiliarize yourself with it. Let's be honest. Okay. Comp time is me telling Joe or Hannah, hey, you worked 50 hours this week. Instead of me paying you the extra 10 hours in overtime, I'm going to give you 10 hours in PTO that you can use whenever you want later on down the road. Okay. That is comp time. Okay. It is specifically avoiding paying the overtime in that work week and crediting them with additional vacation, PTO, what have you. Okay. Comp time is not your normal, already provided PTO, vacation, sick leave. Okay. Comp time is not flex time. Okay. Comp time is literally saying, I'm not paying you overtime and I'm going to give you all this extra time instead. Comp time is illegal. Unless you were a state or a federal government agency, you cannot use comp time.
There it is.
What?
Wow.
I said, there it is. I was trying to figure it out. My dad was a homicide detective for the
Yeah,
city
there
of
you go.
Houston, and I thought, well, he had comp time that before retirement, he was off work, but paid comp for 2.5 years.
Yeah. State and federal. Yep.
Okay, that makes
They
sense.
have different rules. As private employers, we don't get all the cushy extra rules that the state and federal government get.
Could you comp time somebody the 1.5 times if that was the overtime rate?
No,
So 0.
you have to pay the overtime, period. You can't credit it. And that's a great question. You can do it if you want. Call me when you get in trouble. Right? And I get it. And I can say the whole state and federal government, different rules. My dad was director of HR for the Department of Defense for 32 years. So I am the product of a federal government employee, which I reaped those benefits. I'm not going to lie. But they have a whole different set of rules. Even their complaint procedure and working people through, separations of employment, promotions, demotions, all that. It's like a whole different ball game than private employers. We just can't get away with that stuff.
So I don't know if this is the right time to ask a question, but
Go for it.
we work 9-hour days, so it's an hour overtime every day. And we have a tiered pay system. So if they bill more, they always get paid the same amount of hours that they work.
Yeah.
So if they bill more hours, their pay rate goes up for the whole week.
Right.
And so then we pay overtime on, let's just say instead of 38 an hour, they make 50 an hour. The overtime calculation is on the 50 an hour. But
yeah, but if you're doing a tiered, is that flat rate?
No.
Okay.
Well, I don't believe so.
Okay. Here's what I want to do. Email me the pay plans.
And I'm in California, so it's a little different, I think, than some of the other.
Yeah.
So
Love that for us. So yeah, California is very, very different. Yes. So your overtime is after 8 hours. Yes.
yeah,
But the
8 hours
system,
a day, no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah. I might email me the pay plan. Let me look at it. And then we can kind of dig in and get you all squared away and make sure that you're good to go.
Okay. And can I just ask one other question? I don't want to take too much of your time, but For instance, say somebody takes a day off and they take PTO time.
Mhm.
What I normally do, and this is probably isn't correct, is I still give them the overtime pay for that day and then deduct the 8.5 hours off or the 9.5 hours PTO for the overtime off their PTO. Is that the correct way to do that?
Well, their PTO, yeah, if they're working 9-hour days, so I would, if they're taking a day of vacation, I would credit them the 9 hours as
Okay,
well.
but really they're getting paid the 9.5 because the time and a half for the last hour.
Yeah.
So is it a 9.5 hour deduction from PTO or just the straight 9 hours if they're getting paid the time and a half for the last hour?
Well, that's a good question. So how do you value your PTO? Do you do like a look back average?
I'm sorry.
Do you do a look back average? Because I'm assuming it sounds like they're on a tiered production system of some sort. So
Right.
a lot of times what my clients will do is say, we'll look back and average out all of the monies that you've earned over the last 6 months or year, whatever that time frame is. And it's written into their policy this way.
Okay.
And that's going to be the value that you're paid at PTO.
Okay.
So it's
Good
something
idea.
to consider because technically, well, and then we get into California. So are they using it for the Healthy Families Act, the paid sick leave, all of these things, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, we can really get into the weeds on that, but send me your pay plan and your PTO policy, and then we'll talk more offline.
Okay.
Cool. Good questions. All right. So generally speaking, bonuses and commissions are subject to overtime if I'm being paid hourly and overtime eligible. That could be a month-end quarterly bonus. There's a lot of varieties of ways to calculate it. Here's what I will also stand on my soapbox about. Because some of us are using QuickBooks for, you know, payroll. Totally fine. Some of us may be using ADP or Bamboo HR or Paycor or whatever payroll system HRIS you might be using. One of the things that you absolutely have to check into, don't assume, check, is making sure that your payroll system is set up correctly to calculate additional halftime, the additional halftime on bonuses or commissions for non-exempt individuals. Okay. Because your payroll company won't automatically do it for you. You have to check. Right?
Give us an example of that.
Yep.
Oh,
Sure.
okay, good. Here we go.
There you
Okay,
go.
thank you.
There you go. Let's say that I have a service advisor that is paid on salary, right? And technically they really shouldn't be, but that salary divided out is going to give me you know, $20 an hour. Okay. Or we can even say the service advisor is paid $20 an hour and we're doing a straight time. Okay. So a straight time calculation is me saying, I'm going to pay you the $20 an hour across all hours that you work. Okay. I'm still going to pay the overtime. Okay. Still paying the overtime, but I'm using the straight time calculation. So on the left-hand column, I have the wrong example. This is the bad way to do it. Don't do it. On the right-hand column is the correct way to do it. Okay. So let's say my service advisor worked 50 hours this week and I paid them the 20 times 50, which means they got $1,000 in regular hours. Okay. So straight time is a half time, right? So I've already paid the 1 of 1.5 times of overtime. Okay. Does that make sense? I already paid the 1 through paying all 50 hours up front. I still owe them the 0.5 on the hours that exceed 40. So I take $20 times 0.5, which gives me $10 an hour times the 10 hours of overtime. So I give them an extra $100 in overtime that week. But then let's say that week I'll also toss them a $50, I don't know, spiff. They sold some tires or something or some wipers. Okay. So I'm going to bonus them at $50. So that week I just paid them in payroll $1,150. That is wrong. Okay. On the surface, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. No, it's wrong. Why? Because the correct way You still pay the straight time at 50 hours at 20. Okay. So I pay them 1,000, but I have to add in the bonus before I calculate the overtime.
Ah, okay.
So I have total pre-overtime is 1,050, not 1,000. 1,050 divided by 50 hours actually makes my regular rate $21 and not 20. So I take the 21 times 0.5 and I owe them an extra $105 for a total of $1,155. Now, again, these are low-level examples, right? So you may be thinking, oh, $5, big whoop. Okay, well, $5 for 52 weeks, looking back 2 years times 10 other individuals adds up real quick. Okay, plus punitive damages, plus liquidated damages, plus whatever else they nail you on. Okay, here's another example. Let's say I have somebody that's making commissions. Okay. Same example, $20 times 50 hours, straight time is 1,000. And let's say I'm paying them 1.5% of their weekly gross sales. So in this example, it's $60 that week. So I pay them $1,160 when I really owed them $1,166 because the commissions have to be added into the straight time before you calculate the overtime. Okay. I can't tell you how many shops get nailed for this in particular. This is one of the largest issues that they look for in this industry. Okay. Because they know it's an obscure rule. Most people aren't aware of it. It's been around forever. This is not new. This is not new. Don't come at me for that. It's been around forever. And people just assume it's being done. Your payroll company will not necessarily set it up this way unless you ask. Okay. So if you have somebody that is overtime eligible and getting any sort of bonus or commission, even if you're paying it on a month end or a quarterly basis, you still have to go back and look at the weeks in which they worked overtime and do the halftime. Okay. Let me check this chat here for a sec. When you say technically service advisors should not be on salary, what do you mean by that? They can be on salary, but again, if you want to exempt them from overtime, that salary is going to need to be low enough to where you know you can meet the 51% threshold in bonuses or commissions during that representative period of time to exempt them from overtime. Okay. So yeah, you can have a service technician or a service advisor, excuse me, on salary. But if they're making $670 a year in salary and they're not pulling another 71,000 in commission and making 141 year to date, you're going to owe them all the overtime. Okay. So it's about structuring your pay plans correctly. Good question about ADP. Do they have an option to set these calculations up automatically? They can. You need to reach out to your ADP rep. Typically, it would have been done during implementation, but you need to call and verify with them that they are calculating the straight time method. Sometimes we have individuals that work at multiple rates of pay, right? So if I'm doing cleanup work in the shop, maybe I'm making $15 an hour. But if I'm doing general service tech type stuff, I'm making $20 an hour. And I do a little bit, you're paying me different rates depending on different jobs. Okay. Then you have to do the blended rate of pay for purposes of overtime. So you absolutely should check with ADP and just make sure that when you implemented that system, that it is calculated correctly. All great questions. All right. Things that I don't include in regular rate: gifts, special occasion bonuses, holiday bonuses, things that they're not expecting. Okay. Now, here's the one thing I will say about a holiday bonus. If you every year for the last 15 years give a holiday bonus, even if that amount changes, you're going to be hardcore pressed to argue with that wage and hour investigator that it is considered a discretionary bonus because for 15 years you've given it. Okay. Just saying. I ran into that a couple years back.
Wow.
I ran into it a couple years because the employees learned to expect it. Okay. So again, I can argue till I'm blue in the face. I'll find every which way to knock down whatever that initial number is that they come back with good faith defense, with arguing time cards, with arguing paper, you name it. Trust me, I do it all the time. But I mean, one of my larger ones out of Massachusetts, well, it was started out of the Connecticut store, but then it spread to Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maine. They had 30 different locations, and this is a bigger group. What started out as a $800,000 2-year back wage liability, and you know what they got dinged on? Their general service checks, not being paid the additional overtime. They were being paid hourly and overtime, but they were not paid on the extra commissions. I got that down to a little under 300,000. But you gotta have somebody that knows what they're doing. Okay. So trap number 5, improper pay deductions. You cannot just dock money from an employee's paycheck. Contrary to popular belief. Sure, they didn't turn in their uniform. Sure, they backed that, Toyota Tundra into another car on the lot, and you want to hold them accountable, and they're going to pay your insurance deductible for fixing the car. All of these things. Great. Okay, number 1, you can never drop an employee below minimum wage for all hours worked, unless it's a child support garnishment or a court-ordered tax lien. Okay. Those things come from the courts. You don't have a choice. Okay. However, in order for me to take anything outside of normal taxes, Social Security, unemployment, all of that, the stuff that comes out automatically, you must have a very specific signed written wage deduction. If you are having them at the time of hire sign a generic statement that says, your last paycheck will withhold any outstanding debts, loans, blah, 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 blah. If you don't return your tablets, we're going to, dock the fee. And there's no specifics in there. That is wrong. Not going to work. Okay. Some states don't even allow you to dock for damages to vehicles or equipment breakage. Okay. Wage and hour will ask for your wage deduction authorization. So yes, this is a generic one, but I even am getting more particular in that, where number 1, the deduction can't be retroactive. So I can't dock it and then have them sign something. Does that make sense? But if I am, say Joe, you backed into a light post on the lot somewhere. Okay. Bumpers dented in a little bit, whatever. Let's just say it's $500 to pop that. Okay. I would go to Joe and say, hey, Joe, we've got this, assuming I can do it in his locality. We've got $500 worth of damage. So I'm going to draft up a very, very specific wage deduction authorization that tells what the deduction is for, the total amount of the deduction, how many pay periods I'm going to be recouping these monies, and what that specific amount each pay period is going to be. Okay. I'm going to sign it. He's going to sign it. Failure to pay this deduction in full. Should you leave employment, you understand that you are responsible for any remaining balance, and company reserves the right to seek out small claims or civil litigation should you not fulfill your obligation here. Okay. It has to be voluntary. You cannot make any of these deductions a condition of employment. The other thing, I want to go back to this slide real quick. especially with us, it is not uncommon where employees want to do work on their own vehicles and charge it to the house account. I get it. I get it. I do. Just stop the house accounts, because here's how this goes on. They run up a big old bill, parts, time, whatever, and maybe they start paying some of it back, but suddenly they're gone. And then I'm getting the phone call, well, can I withhold this $1,500 that the rest that they owe me from their final paycheck, because they're getting a $4,000 salary and commission check? No, you can't. The other thing that I will say is don't do loans. Employee has a hardship. Hey, I need a loan. Can you loan me one extra paycheck up front, whatever it may be? Again, as a human, your heart, hurts for them, whatever. If you call it a loan, you are subject to the wage deduction rules. If you advance it in full and you call it a wage advancement, I can take it back 100% in one fell swoop. Terminology matters. Don't call it a loan, call it a wage advancement, and you still have to get a signed acknowledgement that I am advancing you 1 month of salary, or 1 week of salary, or 1 week of commissions. And that you understand I will take it back either in 2 increments, whatever. Technically, you take it back 100%. And they could get 0 paycheck for the next one, only if it is called an advancement. Okay. I don't even really like those things. And that makes me sound cold-hearted, and I'm not, I promise. I'm an HR person, I'm very loving, but it complicates things. And it just gives us more opportunity and to be, alleged that we've done something wrong. Trap number 6. Independent contractors.
There's some questions, Jamie. Some questions, I think.
Okay. Could you display? I think I did. What if it is an optional matching Christmas club program for employees? For a wage deduction or a bonus? I'm not sure I understand what that.
It was earlier when you were talking about bonus, I think.
Yeah, so, but that's going into a separate program. It should be. So if the employee is contributing through a payroll deduction that they have signed and authorized for $10 to go into their Christmas club program, and you say, hey, I'm going to give you all $100 this year, that's not a bonus. That's discretionary. That's separate. That's like a benefit. Question is, what if you're going to give everyone a stake in the outcome bonus for the previous year? Everyone gets the exact same amount, say $500. Does that fall into any overtime? Yeah, if it is tied to anything where they hit a goal and they know they're going to get $500, it's considered non-discretionary and subject to overtime. So.
If that's not tied to a goal, though, if it's just something we say, hey, listen, we did good last year, and I'm going to give everybody's going to get the same amount, and we're just going to give this out, but there's no written program for it. It's just, I'm being generous.
Yeah, Bill, I think I could argue reasonably that if there really was nothing and you told them about it, like in Q1 of the next year, and said, hey, we closed out last year's books and we had a phenomenal year, so we're going to toss everybody $500. Fine, I can argue that discretionary all day long.
Okay, so even if the previous year said, listen, at the end of the year, we'll see how we do, and if I can, I'm going to give everybody a little something.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. Independent contractors. Just don't do it.
1099, right?
Just don't do it.
Okay.
Okay, so let me back up. I'm getting a little big for my britches over here. If it's like a maintenance crew or an after hours cleaning crew, somebody that owns their own separate business with their own federal ID number, their own workers' comp insurance, they're only providing short-term services or random services like yard work for your location or once a week cleaning when the office is closed, fine. Okay. But trying to hire a detailer to come in on a 1099 when you're telling them, hey, we're open from 7:30 to 6. You need to be here between 8 and 5. Here's how much I'm going to pay you per car. All of that stuff, you're controlling them. If they are working more than 40 hours or at full time for you as a 1099, they're not a 1099. They're an employee. If they are not bringing their own tools, equipment, resources, if they don't have the ability for profit or loss, they are an employee. Okay. There is a lot of tax liability, workers' comp liability, overtime liability, and DOL has always been actively pursuing that. It is really, I could get into a whole spiel about independent contractors. There's an IRS 20-factor test, a state ABC test, and then a DOL 6-point test. They're really, really hard to hit. Okay. So don't do it. Please. Okay. By law, wage and hour requires you to keep certain record-keeping information. Name, address, sex, birthday, especially if they're under the age of 19. Also, general rule of thumb, if they are under the age of 18, they should not be in any of those service bays, especially operating lifts. Okay. State OSHA, federal OSHA, if that's a hydraulic lift or they're exposed to certain health hazards and they are under the age of 18, we're gonna have a problem. So these are all of the things that wage and hour require you to maintain. General rule of thumb is all payroll records for at least 3 years, pay plans, employee contracts, timesheets, earning records, all of it. Why? Because if you get audited, you're going to have to hand it all over. Okay. Yeah, you can keep it electronically as long as there's disaster recovery in place and you can access those records. Time schedules, at least 2 years there. Let's see, I got a question. What if the minors are children of the owners? It depends on the locality. I would still prefer, I get it, especially with family-owned businesses. You bring them up, they're 14, they're 15, they're helping clean up around the shop, they're doing whatever, they're learning from your little master tech. However, here's what I will tell you. If your son or daughter gets injured at your business as a 15 or 16-year-old, OSHA doesn't care whether they're family or not. If a car rolls off of one of those lifts, which I've had happen to a client, not with a child, but with an adult who had grown up in his father's business and was a master tech for Ford at the age of 22. Put the wrong truck on the wrong lift because they got sloppy. And he knew better. He knew better. Everybody knew that he knew better. And that truck rolled off and crushed him. He died.
Oh, man.
In front of the entire service department. And they got hit with a $75,000 fine. So I hear you. DOL is a little, well, wage and hour in terms of child labor for family tends to be a little bit more flexible. But remember, there are very specific child labor laws as well that they will enforce. Like, and so, you know, it's not like we're an agriculture or farm operation, which, you know, they allow them to work from sun up to sundown without, you know, minimum wage standards, right? So just be mindful of it. But that's a good question. Okay. I know way past time. Okay, so I talked about financial penalties. So if we have not been paying correctly or there's miscalculations, so not only do they do a 2-year look back period, right? They run the calculations for everybody. Now, if you have multiple locations and they open up an investigation at one site and they find deficiencies in that one site, they're going to open it up to all the others. I don't care if they're in different states. Okay. So they run their numbers, and let's just for ease say they found $100,000 between your 2 sites for the last 2 years. DOL in the regulation has what we call liquidated damages. That automatically doubles the back wage liability. So that 100,000 automatically becomes 200,000. You don't get a payment plan for that. You literally have 30, maybe 60 days if your investigator is playing well with your representative to literally find $200,000 and start cutting individual checks and doing all the paperwork and getting that out and having proof that you have sent out and gotten the Form 58 signed and all of these things. Okay. Now, if you go into litigation or they know, maybe you've been audited before, they're going to look back 3 years. If it is glaring, DOL can say, forget this, we're taking you to court. And then you got the 4-year liability, attorney's fees, punitive damages, compensatory damages, all of the things. It adds up so quick. All right, so quickly, let's talk about what happens if you get an audit. One of the questions earlier in our session today was, do they just do it for fun? They absolutely do. I have had auditors randomly just be driving by a client and pull in and just pop in and be like, hey, I'm Jamie Hasty from the Wage and Hour Division. Is your owner here? We're going to do an audit. They can absolutely do that. They have the right and the authority to do that. But oftentimes it is either an industry target and or it's driven by an internal complaint. Okay. Your auditor's not going to tell you which one. Now, typically, I'm going to ask you, who's your problem child? Who have you recently let go? Who has recently complained about their pay? But also, just like with harassment, discrimination, retaliation on the EEOC side, if somebody makes an internal complaint to Wage and Hour and they are still working for you, you cannot retaliate against them. Okay. It is a very, very serious business. I do not suggest you go it alone because of the intricacies, because you need somebody that speaks Wage and Hour language. People often get nervous. So when a federal government individual comes in and they have badges, which you should always ask to see their identification. They come in, they may sit down and they'd be like, so tell me about your payroll and da 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 da. All too often, because human nature is, we tend to overshare. You tend to say more or provide more information than what the actual question was. Right? And now you've kind of opened up Pandora's box. Maybe they were only looking at or interested in one thing. Sometimes I have auditors that really could nail clients that I'm representing on a variety of other areas, but they really didn't dig too far into that. They only were really focused on this one aspect. And I have some that just like will hammer you down on every little thing. Typically, you will get a notice through the portal. You'll get an email, electronic notification that you are subject to a Wage and Hour investigation. Log into the portal. Here's the information that you need to pull. Here's when the investigator wants to be on site. Sometimes they still come on site. A lot of times they'll just require you to upload it into the portal, but they're going to send you a list of about 12 items that you're going to have to upload. Here's the important piece. If you ever get a notification of an audit, you need to pick up the phone and call SESCO. Okay. Why? Because I want to run my own audit. I want to dig in. It is not uncommon for the federal government auditor to get the numbers wrong. Everything is a negotiation. Or I want to get in front of it. I want to be able to explain exactly how and why we did something. So one of the things that helped me negotiate with that big case up in the Northeast that I was talking about, it went from like 800 down to 300, was that we were paying certain holidays and on call, well, not holidays, excuse me, we were paying certain on call at double and triple time. They really weren't doing on call. They were sitting around. They might take like one on call for like 20 minutes or, you know, an hour or two, like once a month. But because I was paying that double or triple time, I got to take the credit. Does that make sense? I took the credit because we had overpaid for that week. So I took the credit against the back wage liability. And that was just one example. So pick up the phone, call. You're going to want somebody to do their own audit and get you prepped and designate themselves as what we call the agent of record. Okay. That means that I am now, or whoever your representative is now speaking directly with that investigator. We're pulling you out of it. You're still involved on the back end, but I speak their language. So when they say, you know, portal to portal act and this and that, and ordinary home to work travel and this and that, I know exactly what they're talking about. Okay. I know exactly how to answer their questions or how to spin things or how to argue cases to support why somebody is retail 7I and why I use this on a flat rate basis, because we're using the book time. Okay. Typically audits, depending on how many locations they're looking at, it can take 3, sometimes 9, 10, 12 months. Okay. Again, they're going to look at everybody that worked there. They are going to ask to speak with your employees. Now, here's the thing. With non-managerial employees, you can't be present for that conversation. I have to allow them, whether they want to do that on site during the day or whether they're planning to call those employees after hours. That's why you have to give an employee listing with names and contact information. Now, if they want to interview my managers, I can absolutely sit in those meetings. As an observer, I can't speak a word, but I can prep all parties to say, hey, you may be contacted by Joe Smith at the Wage and Hour Division. They'll be asking you some questions. I don't know exactly what they're going to ask, but what I want you to do is be open and honest and truthful in your responses. Be very cooperative with them. You cannot intimidate, threaten, try to coach them on what to say or to change their story, because then you're going to get slapped with a retaliation and interference charge. Okay. So they'll run their calculations. They'll come back with a preliminary number. I'll say, thanks so much. I appreciate that. We need some time just to review this. We'll get back with you. And then I'm checking their numbers against mine. And I'm finding ways to negotiate and argue some of that down. Okay. Then I come back with my counter proposal. And it becomes this back and forth. We do that and then have them revise their report before I agree to anything. Never take their numbers at face value. Okay. You don't get a payment plan. Like I said, 30 days typically. Most I've ever gotten negotiated, and it was a really big settlement with like 400 or 500 people, was they allowed them up to 90 days to cut the checks. But it was only because of like the administrative burden of all of it. Wage and hour compliance officers have authority. They absolutely do. You cannot deny them access. You can't say, I'm not going to talk to you. They have badges. But what we also don't want to do is let them just wander around the location either. Okay. So it's kind of just a very high level viewpoint of the investigation. I know I threw a heck of a lot at you in a very short amount of time.
So good.
All right, let's see. We've got some questions. No, the pay plan audit is not included. There are separate services that we can talk about offline for higher level access.
Yeah, Jamie, I attached a screenshot of what our
Yeah.
services cover or what
Yeah.
our membership covers. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
I think also everyone should go to the SESCO website and sign up for your newsletter every month,
Yes.
right? Newsletter,
Yep.
they get a lot of good information, a lot of good relevant information, and some of it's state specific too. So it's good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. SESCOMGT.com.
Yeah.
Any more
That's cool. What I'm
questions?
sorry.
Any other questions? I'm sorry. Someone had a
SESCO.
question.
What was the website again? I'm sorry.
It's SESCO MGT, like management.
Okay.
SESCO, SESCOMGT.com. And as a reminder, I will send an email with all of this. It will have everything we talked about today, a recording, the slide deck, phone numbers, emails, websites, what Elite's cover or membership covers, all your
Yes.
benefits as a client of Elite.
Okay.
This has
Because
been great.
the whole
This has
HR
been-
part is just so foreign from, we work
Yep.
on cars, right?
Yeah.
You do that, you concentrate on that, you do the best to take care of your people. But then it's like at the end, you're like, am I really doing the right things?
I know.
think
Yep.
I am.
Yep.
I'm trying to.
Yeah.
It's scary. And, I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Well-
That's why I have a job. But, we just want to make sure that we're trying to educate as much as possible. And you're right. You're
Well-
trying to run a business. You don't always think about these weird things.
I mean, I have somebody do my living trust. I have a plumber. You need somebody for HR, right? It's not what we do.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
it's very important these days. Jamie, this was really amazing. I know you ran over, but it was unbelievable information that we all need. So thank you so much. It was a great presentation. It was a lot of information, but it was well worth it. Well worth it. It really was. Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay.
I guess that's it. If there aren't any last comments or questions, I'll let everybody go. And thank you for being here. Thank you again, Jamie. Hannah, thank you for being behind the scenes again. So it really was great. And next month, we'll have a different topic to discuss, clients. So looking forward to that. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
And that's it. Call Jamie if you need her. You're going to need her. Take care.
Thank you
Thanks.
all.
Yeah, bye now. Bye, everybody.